16 years old, and she had never called anyone mom or dad and meant it. Never had a bedroom that was truly hers. Never experienced the security of knowing someone would choose her, keep her, love her unconditionally no matter what. When Emma Foster walked onto the America's Got Talent stage, she carried with her the weight of a lifetime spent being temporary. 12 different foster homes, countless social workers, endless goodbyes to people who were supposed to become family, but never quite did. Simon Cowell thought he was about to hear another teenage singer with dreams of stardom. He had no idea he was about to experience the most emotionally devastating and beautifully honest performance of his entire career. When Emma began to sing about what it feels like to grow up knowing that no one in the world chose you, when her voice carried the pain of 16 years of being nobody's child, Simon Cowell realized he wasn't just witnessing a performance. He was being trusted with the deepest wound of someone who had learned to transform abandonment into art, loneliness into music, and the absence of family into the most profound expression of love he'd ever heard. It was Wednesday evening at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, and America's Got Talent was in the middle of what would become its most emotionally transformative season yet. The familiar energy buzzed through the venue, 3,400 audience members filling the red velvet seats, many of them from foster care advocacy groups, adoption agencies, and child welfare organizations who had heard about Emma's audition through social service networks and online forums dedicated to supporting children in care. Simon Cowell sat at the judges' table in his signature black t-shirt and perfectly tailored blazer, but tonight his expression carried more sensitivity than usual. The producers had briefed him about this particular contestant in terms that had prepared him for a difficult but important story. They'd explained that he was about to meet someone whose life experience challenged everything most people took for granted about childhood, family, and belonging. Sofia Vergara was unusually quiet, having been deeply moved during the pre-show briefing about Emma's journey through the foster care system and her determination to find family through music when biological and adoptive families had never materialized. Heidi Klum and Howie Mandel were both subdued, understanding that they were about to hear from someone whose childhood had been fundamentally different from anything they had experienced. Terry Crews had spent extra time preparing for this introduction, knowing that his words needed to create safety for someone who had rarely experienced unconditional acceptance. Backstage, Emma Foster sat in the contestant waiting area, but she didn't sit like most 16-year-olds. There was something careful about her posture, something guarded in the way she held herself, the body language of someone who had learned early that comfort could disappear at any moment. That attachment was dangerous because it made departure painful. She wore a simple navy blue dress that Mrs. Patricia had helped her choose from a thrift store, the fabric clean and pressed, but clearly not new, not expensive. At 16, she looked both younger and older than her age. Younger because of her small frame and the way she seemed to take up minimal space wherever she was. Older because her eyes held experiences that most adults never faced. Her hands moved nervously in her lap, not with typical teenage anxiety, but with the hypervigilance of someone who had learned to read every adult expression, every tone change, every sign that might indicate whether she was welcome or about to be moved along. Beside her sat Mrs. Patricia Williams, her current foster mother, and the first adult in Emma's life who had genuinely encouraged her musical abilities rather than seeing them as an inconvenience or distraction. Mrs. Patricia was 54 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who had started fostering late in life after her own children were grown. She had been Emma's placement for 8 months now, longer than Emma had stayed anywhere since she was 11 years old. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Mrs. Patricia asked gently, using the term of endearment that still made Emma flinch slightly, not from dislike, but from the learned caution of someone who had heard loving words disappear too many times. "I'm okay," Emma replied, her voice carrying the careful neutrality she had perfected over years of not wanting to seem too needy, too emotional, too much trouble. I just, I hope people understand what I'm trying to say. The journey to this moment had been a series of losses, disappointments, and small survivals that had shaped Emma into someone far older than her chronological age. She had been abandoned at Detroit General Hospital as a newborn, left in the emergency room bathroom with no identification, no family history, no explanation, just a baby girl who became a ward of the state before she was old enough to understand what that meant. The social worker who found her had named her Emma. "It means universal," she had explained years later when Emma was old enough to ask about her origins. "We thought maybe if you belonged to everyone, you'd find where you belonged." The last name Foster had been added when she was placed in her first temporary home, a bureaucratic designation that became prophetic. She would always be fostering, never quite adopted, never quite permanent. The next 16 years had been a cycle of temporary placements, well-meaning but overwhelmed foster families, and the constant underlying message that she was a guest in everyone's life but a permanent member of no one's family. Emma had learned to pack her few belongings in garbage bags, to sleep lightly in case she needed to leave quickly, to never get too attached to bedrooms, schools, or the other children in her foster homes who might become siblings for a few weeks or months before the placements ended. Some placements had been difficult. Families who saw foster children as monthly checks rather than individuals, homes where Emma learned to make herself invisible to avoid conflict. Others had been kind but temporary, families waiting for their real children to arrive through adoption, or dealing with crises that made keeping an extra child impossible. The Gonzalez family had kept her for almost a year when she was 10, long enough for Emma to start believing she might finally have a permanent home before Mr. Gonzalez lost his job and they couldn't afford to keep fostering. Through it all, Emma had discovered music, not through lessons or encouragement from any of her foster families, but through necessity, humming to comfort herself when she was scared, singing to fill the silence in rooms where she didn't belong, writing songs about feelings she had no one to share with. Her first song had been written when she was 7 years old, sitting in a closet in the Murphy home while the family argued about whether they could handle keeping her through the school year. She had hummed a melody to keep from crying, then added words about wishing she could fly away to somewhere that would keep her. Music had become Emma's constant companion, the one relationship that never ended with a social worker's visit and another garbage bag full of possessions. Every foster home, every new school, every goodbye, the music stayed with her, growing more complex as her experiences deepened, becoming the repository for all the love she had to give, but no permanent family to receive it. By the time she was 14, Emma was writing sophisticated songs about foster care, about abandonment, about the specific kind of grief that comes from watching other children get adopted while you remain behind. She would perform them quietly in her room, recording them on an old phone, creating a musical diary of experiences that were too complex for most adults to understand. Mrs. Patricia had discovered Emma's musical abilities by accident. 3 months into Emma's placement with her, Mrs. Patricia had heard singing coming from Emma's room, not casual teenage singing, but something deeper, more heartbreakingly beautiful than anything she had expected. When she listened more carefully, she realized Emma was singing original songs about her life, songs that revealed depths of pain and resilience that their daily interactions had only hinted at. "Music became my family," Emma had told Mrs. Patricia during one of their late-night conversations. "It was the only thing that stayed with me, no matter where I went. Every foster home, every new school, every goodbye. The music was always there. It never decided I was too much trouble. It never found a real child it preferred." "Emma Foster," called Maria, one of the production assistants, her voice carrying special gentleness, since everyone on staff had been moved by Emma's story during the initial interviews and rehearsals. Emma stood up carefully, smoothing down her dress, one of only two she owned, purchased from a thrift store with money Mrs. Patricia had given her specifically for the audition. She had agonized over the choice, wanting to look appropriate for television, but having no experience with what that meant, no mother to consult. "Remember what we talked about," Mrs. Patricia said, reaching out to squeeze Emma's hand. "You're not performing for them, you're sharing your truth. And your truth is beautiful, even when it's painful." Emma nodded, but her expression showed the vulnerability of someone who had learned not to expect too much from moments that seemed promising. "Will you be watching?" Emma asked, the question carrying all the weight of someone who had performed for empty auditoriums her entire life. "I'll be right there in the wings," Mrs. Patricia promised, "and no matter what happens, you're coming home with me tonight. You belong somewhere now." Terry Crew's voice carried across the theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emma Foster." The curtain rose, and Emma began the walk that would either validate everything she had survived or become another disappointment in a life that had taught her not to hope for too much. As she walked across the stage, the audience's reaction was warm but cautious. Emma looked like what she was, a young girl who had grown up without the security that creates confidence, who moved through the world carefully because she had learned that spaces she occupied were usually temporary. Simon leaned forward, studying Emma with gentle attention. There was something about this teenager that commanded respect, not through charisma or obvious talent, but through a dignity that seemed impossible given what he knew about her background. "Good evening, Emma," Terry said warmly as Emma reached center stage, where a simple microphone waited. "Good evening," Emma replied, her voice carrying the careful politeness of someone who had learned to be grateful for any attention, positive or negative. "Tell us a little about yourself. How old are you, and where are you from?" Emma took a breath, clearly preparing to share something she rarely talked about publicly. "I'm Emma Foster. I'm 16 years old, and I don't really know where I'm from. I was abandoned as a baby at a hospital in Detroit, and I've been in the foster care system my whole life. I've lived in 12 different homes, and I've never been adopted." The simple directness of her statement sent a wave of emotion through the theater. This wasn't self-pity or dramatic storytelling. This was just a teenager stating the facts of her life with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had long ago stopped expecting things to be different. "That must have been very difficult," Terry said gently. "Sometimes," Emma acknowledged, "but it also taught me things. It taught me that people leave, but music stays. It taught me that you can't wait for someone to love you. You have to learn to love yourself. And it taught me that family isn't always about blood or adoption papers. Sometimes it's about finding something that accepts you exactly as you are." Simon found himself completely absorbed by Emma's mature perspective on experiences that would have broken many adults. "And music became that for you?" Terry continued. "Music became everything for me," Emma said, her voice carrying real emotion. "When I was little, I would sing myself to sleep in foster homes where I didn't know if I'd be there the next week. When I got moved from place to place, my songs were the only thing that came with me. Music never left me, never decided I was too much trouble." The audience was completely silent, understanding that they were hearing from someone whose relationship with music transcended entertainment and entered the realm of survival. "How long have you been writing your own songs?" Terry asked. "Since I was 7, Emma replied. "My first song was called Invisible Girl. I wrote it in a closet while my foster family argued about whether they wanted to keep me. I've written over 100 songs since then. Songs about waiting to be chosen, songs about watching other kids get adopted, songs about learning to take care of yourself when no one else will." "What are you going to perform for us tonight?" Terry asked. Emma looked directly at the camera, understanding that somewhere in the viewing audience might be other foster children who needed to hear what she was about to say. "I wrote a song called Nobody's Child. It's about what it feels like to grow up knowing that no one in the world chose you, but also about how you can choose to become your own family, how you can learn to mother yourself when no mother claims you. It's about finding strength in being unwanted, about discovering that sometimes the people who have the least are the ones who understand love the most." "All right, Emma," Terry said, stepping back. "The stage is yours." Emma positioned herself at the microphone, and for a moment she stood completely still. Then she began to sing, and what emerged was unlike anything anyone in that theater had ever experienced. Her voice was pure, untrained, but naturally beautiful, carrying emotional authenticity that no vocal coach could teach. But it was the lyrics that devastated everyone listening. Nobody's child. That's what I've always been, moving through houses where I can't move in, sleeping in beds that will never be mine, learning to say thank you and I'm fine. Simon's expression was already changing, his professional composure giving way to something much more vulnerable. Nobody chose me, nobody stayed. I'm just a guest in every place. I've laid my head on pillows that smell like someone else, teaching my heart to love itself. The audience was transfixed. This wasn't just a song. This was testimony, delivered with truth that made everyone listening examine their own assumptions about family and belonging. But maybe nobody's child can be everybody's daughter. Maybe the love I never had can flow like water to every other kid who sleeps alone at night. Maybe my voice can be their light. Sophia was crying openly, understanding that she was witnessing someone transform the deepest pain into the most generous gift. As Emma reached the bridge of her song, her voice grew stronger. They said I was unwanted, said I was a mistake, but maybe I was born for every heart that breaks. Maybe I was meant to sing for all the lost and alone. Maybe being nobody's child means making the whole world home. The final chorus was the most powerful. I'm nobody's child, but I'm somebody's song. I'm everybody's daughter. When the night gets long, I'm the voice for the voiceless, the heart for the broken. I'm the love that exists even when it's not spoken. When Emma's voice faded, the silence in the Dolby Theater was profound. Then Simon did something unprecedented. He stood up, walked around the judges' table, and approached the stage with tears streaming down his face. Emma, he said, barely above a whisper, you didn't just perform a song. You gave every person in this theater the most important lesson about love and family that any of us will ever receive. His voice thick with emotion. You taught us that family isn't just about who claims you. It's about who you become because of what you've survived. You showed us that being nobody's child doesn't mean being nobody. It means understanding love in a way that most people never will. Emma was crying now, honest tears of someone finally being seen, finally being understood. You just became the voice for every child who has ever felt unwanted, unloved, forgotten. You turned your pain into their hope, your loneliness into their company. Simon looked at his fellow judges. What Emma just shared, this transformation of abandonment into love, this gift to every child who has ever felt alone, this deserves recognition from all of us. All four judges moved to their golden buzzers simultaneously. Emma Foster, Simon announced, you receive a unanimous golden buzzer for proving that sometimes being nobody's child means becoming everybody's daughter. All four judges pressed their buzzers together. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, raining down on Emma, who looked up with wonder. Mrs. Patricia appeared from the wings, embracing Emma on stage. Does this mean I really do belong somewhere? Emma asked, carrying 16 years of uncertainty. You belong everywhere now, sweetheart. You belong to all of us. 3 months later, Emma Foster won America's Got Talent, but more importantly, her story sparked a national conversation about foster care and adoption. Her performance became the most watched AGT audition in history. The Emma Foster Foundation was established, providing music programs for children in foster care. Mrs. Patricia officially adopted Emma, giving her the legal family she had never had. Emma proved that belonging doesn't always come from being chosen. Sometimes it comes from choosing to share your truth so honestly that the whole world recognizes itself in your pain and hope. Sometimes being nobody's child means becoming everybody's inspiration, proving that love can exist even where it's never been planted, that music really can become family, and that the most powerful voices often come from those who have learned to sing in silence.